Thank you, Gilbert, and hello, everybody. Thank you for staying with the program to now. As Gilbert has mentioned, AdAlta is a drug discovery and development company. We are based in Melbourne, Australia. We are listed on the Australian Securities Exchange. And as a result, my comments today come with the usual disclosures about forward-looking statements. Our mission in life is to use our unique iBody technology that Gilbert has just described to create multiple novel therapeutics for debilitating diseases that have essentially proved challenging to drug with traditional antibody technologies. Yeah, why do we need new drug discovery tools? Well, the short answer is that while small molecule drugs and more recently antibody drugs have been wonderful solutions to many diseases, there still remain many diseases where we still don't have the ability to drug known pathways effectively. In other words, we know the mechanism by which disease works, but we can't get a drug to block that mechanism appropriately. A good example is our lead focus today, which is a disease called Idiopathic Pulmonary Fibrosis. This is a disease that is due to scarring of the lungs. Fibrosis means scarring, and this results in the lung tissue thickening and becoming stiffer, resulting in reduced respiratory capacity. This is a degenerative and fatal disease that on average, patients will die within 4 years of diagnosis. This is a $3 billion a year market already, with 2 drugs attempting to treat this disease that do not work. They slow the rate of progression, but do not extend life and have serious side effects that prevent many patients tolerating these drugs for more than about a year. There is thus a high unmet need for new therapies, and we know a new pathway to treat this disease, or that's involved in this disease, and we have been unable as an industry to successfully address it. AdAlta's first iBody candidate addresses this pathway. Not only is this disease a significant burden today, but it's likely to become even larger in the future because survivors of acute COVID-19 are likely to generate lung fibrosis. Long COVID is likely to increase the demand and the need for better antifibrotic drugs. So this is a very important space in which we're working. AdAlta, however, is about much more than just our lead asset. We start with our iBody platform. This is the engine room of our company that enables us to create multiple different therapeutics against these underserved billion-dollar markets. In essence, we are an asset creation company, using our iBodies as the core, or the intel inside, if you like, of those products. We've so far developed 2 products from the platform. The first is our lead asset. We call it Ad214, being developed for multiple fibrotic diseases and potentially cancer, but with an initial focus on the $3 billion market for IPF. This drug is now in phase 1 clinical trials where single doses have been demonstrated to be well tolerated, and we clearly engage the target receptor. This is the first drug addressing this receptor pathway in this disease. And we expect an initial partnering window to open for this drug towards the end of this year. Our second asset, which we call GZMB, for short for Granzyme B, is a co-development collaboration with multinational company GE Healthcare. This is a diagnostic agent being developed for the large and growing immuno-oncology or immunotherapy market. This program is fully funded by GE Healthcare, who have so far paid over $1.4 million in revenue to AdAlta to date, and it is addressing or participating in a $6.4 billion PET imaging market. In addition to the assets that we have in hand today, we also have a clear pathway forward to continue to grow the company, adding products to our pipeline and adding value to the existing assets. We are a 2-product company today. By the end of 2021, We anticipate having 5 products in our pipeline, and by the end of 2023, we expect that to be 10. Over the course of the next 6 to 12 months, we expect to continue to grow and to de-risk AD214 with additional phase 1 data in healthy volunteers, new data in patients, and as I mentioned, that first partnering window opening towards the end of the year. We're also planning to add other assets into our pipeline. We anticipate in the next few months a second co-development collaboration to go alongside the GE collaboration, and then 2 further internal programs will commence during 2021. And by that means by the end of the year, we will have scientists in white coats working on 5 different product programs. So what is an iBody and what's so special about it? The top panel on this slide is a cartoon showing the differences between small molecules, traditional antibodies, and iBodies. The small molecule, the pockets on this cartoon show receptors for drugs in the membrane of a cell, on the outside of a cell, in the envelope that wraps up the cell. And it's these receptors that enable a cell to communicate with the outside world. Now, many drug targets sit on the surface of that membrane, but many, as shown here, are buried deep in the membrane. So small molecules are very effective at getting into these pockets. Unfortunately, they're not particularly specific, and so we often have what are called off-target effects, which create some of the side effects that we see for many small molecule drugs. 30 years ago, antibody drugs modeled on our own immune systems revolutionized our ability to target these kinds of receptors with a great degree of specificity. They are large molecules, as is evidenced or shown by the cartoon in the middle. And the binding areas at the end of the arms are relatively flat, and this makes it difficult for them to penetrate into these membrane-bound receptors. Our iBodies, modeled on the way the shark and the camelid immune systems developed, and in our case, we've modeled it on the shark immune system, actually developed these smaller format antibodies that are 10% the size of a traditional antibody. If you like, they're one of the modules at the end of one of the arms, and they have longer binding regions at the ends, which enables them to access and penetrate these membrane-bound receptors. And so our iBodies enable us to get into these difficult receptors and engage them in a way that traditional antibodies have not. Our iBody platform is patented in its own right, and then additional products that we develop from the platform receive additional patent protection. Our AD214 drug, for example, has patent protection out to 2036. So let's turn to AD214 and fibrotic diseases. The top panel on this slide shows human lung tissue. On the left, a healthy lung, and on the right, a fibrotic lung. And you can see that in the fibrotic lung, the natural open tissue architecture that allows gas exchange between the air and your bloodstream has been destroyed. It's thick, it's inflexible, and it's not surprising that patients with pulmonary fibrosis, lung fibrosis, do not have the same lung capacity. The brown staining in the right-hand picture shows an increase in the receptor that we are targeting, which is called CXCR4. You'll see that there is no brown staining on the left, and that is evidence of the correlation between the presence of CXCR4 and fibrotic disease. Now, what are we trying to achieve with AD214 is shown in the bottom panel, which is the results of a study of AD214 in a mouse model of lung fibrosis. The picture on the left shows normal lung tissue. The picture in the middle shows the fibrotic lung tissue in the mouse. And in this case, the purple staining is collagen, which is a marker of fibrosis. This is the stiff agent that leads to scars being a stiff and inflexible feature. The picture on the right shows that mouse treated with AD214, and you can see a return to the normal tissue architecture and much lower collagen. Where are we up to in the development of AD214? We're now in phase 1 clinical trials. This is the first step towards approval of a product. There are 2 more phases to go after this. In phase 1, in single dose studies, we've demonstrated an excellent safety profile. We've confirmed that we have engaged the CXCR4 receptor, and importantly, we've shown that we can occupy or block that receptor for a long period of time, much longer than the circulation of the drug in the blood. And this is important because it means that we can now look towards longer intervals between doses, which is more convenient and cheaper for the patients and cheaper to manufacture the drug. We're continuing the multi-dose studies. They will be complete by the end of the year, at which point we expect a partnering window to open for this drug. If I turn now to the collaboration with GE Healthcare, the market we're working in here is the market for immuno-oncology drugs. And there's a technique called PET imaging, which is used frequently in cancer to help diagnose cancer and to understand its progression. A key feature of the cancer treatment market in the last 5 years or so has been the introduction of new immuno-oncology drugs that treat cancer not by killing the cancer itself, but by reactivating the patient's own immune system to fight cancer. And this market is projected to reach $95 billion by 2026 or 7. Despite the phenomenal success of these drugs, unfortunately, only 20 to 40% of patients actually respond to them. And today, unfortunately, the only way you know if you're responding is if your tumor, or you're not responding, is when your tumor progresses. So there's a significant opportunity if we can identify patient responders early. And this is the challenge that we're working on with GE. Just a reminder about the size of this market. The PET imaging agent market alone is worth $6 billion a year, and the largest product generates sales of over $400 million. And so while these are not quite so large as potential therapeutic drugs, these programs, these diagnostic agents are able to reach the market faster. The development timeline is much shorter, and therefore we could potentially be earning royalty revenue from a successful program here before we earn it from AD214. So our collaboration with GE Healthcare involves GE bringing us their expertise in PET imaging, combined with our ability, our iBody platform, to reach difficult targets. Our task is to discover iBodies that bind to an enzyme called granzyme B. This is a biomarker or an indicator that your immune system has been activated. And so clearly, if we can see that early in treatment with a checkpoint inhibitor, we're going to be able to identify your response to cancer, to the checkpoint inhibitor immuno-oncology drugs faster. GE have fully funded this program for AdAlta. They've funded the discovery part of the program over the last 12 to 15 months, and that is now completed, and we've earned 1.4 million Australian dollars in revenue over that period of time. We've now progressed a panel of iBodies into preclinical development, and GE have asked us to provide additional assistance in that preclinical development process to our original contract. And this means we'll generate even more revenue from this arrangement prior to the normal milestones and royalties that will come with successful clinical development and commercialization. This, in essence, is a pipeline asset for AdAlta at no financial cost to the company. So turning now to how we're growing the business, we have two key commercialization pathways to leverage our platform. The first is developing a pipeline of internal assets such as AD214 that are wholly owned by AdAlta and which are then developed and partnered with pharmaceutical companies at about phase 1 or phase 2. We anticipate adding 2 more programs into our internal pipeline later this year. The second pathway is our external pipeline or co-development pipeline, as exemplified by our collaboration with GE Healthcare. And we anticipate adding a further collaboration in the next few months. So how should one think about value at AdAlta? To date, most analysts writing about us think of us as a AD214 Idiopathic Pulmonary Fibrosis company. Even AD214 itself is worth more than that when we think about the possible other indications, other fibrotic diseases to which it could address. But in addition to that, we have the value of the external partnerships. And as we've discussed, these could bring royalty revenue to AdAlta much faster and get us to a product to the market much faster than the internal programs today. These are significant additional value adds that we believe are not fully recognized by the market today. And the third part of our value is really the inherent value of the platform to continue to create multiple new assets over time. And indeed, there are many companies, as you can see on the right-hand side of this panel, who've successfully deployed this model of multiple asset creations from a unique discovery platform that have generated significant value and return to shareholders over time. Ablinks is a company that we look to particularly, who were eventually sold for $5 billion, which was a 10 times multiple on the capital that had been invested in the company. Now, we're not quite on that pathway yet, but we're certainly aspiring to get there. So what should investors look out for AdAlta over the coming months? We've had a great start to the year with both AD214 achieving orphan drug designation with the US Food and Drug Administration, and this gives us opportunities for accelerated approval pathways for that drug later in development. We've also released the phase 1 single dose results in healthy volunteers, and through the rest of the year we're looking towards further results in the multi-dose healthy volunteer studies, and studies in patients will commence as well. In terms of our other assets, as I mentioned, we're looking to add 3 more assets to our pipeline through the year, and they are the key milestones for the rest of the year. Looking to our vital statistics, we have a market capitalisation today of between 30 and 40 million Australian dollars. That's very similar to Canadian dollars. We have $6 million of cash in the bank at the 31st of March. We've delivered a 40% return on our last capital raise, which was at 10 cents, and 100% return over the past year. So in summary, we believe AdAlta is a really attractive proposition to be considering for your portfolio. We have a platform to create value multiple times with multiple assets over time. We have a lead asset with multiple indications addressing a $3 billion market minimum. We have a second asset in collaboration already with a global multinational company, GE Healthcare. We have a clear vision for expanding the pipeline and growing the business. The team are all industry experienced and have done this before, and we have several near-term growth catalysts available to us. So with that, we look forward to additional questions that you may have, and would love to have you consider us for your investment portfolio. My contact details are here and can be found on our website. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Oldham. So let's get on with the questions here. The first one from Michael Olsen. So how has the patent of AD214 by the Japan Patent Office affected the company so far?
So we've been progressing patent applications for AD214 around the world since 2015, when we first filed that patent. We now have it approved in Australia, the US, and Japan. It is pending in Europe and China, and this is a normal part of rolling out patent protection around the world. Certainly having that protection in the second largest individual pharmaceutical market in the world is an important step to protecting and commercializing the asset.
And the next question coming from Mazutaki is: the Australian capital markets receptive to this kind of healthcare stocks at this time?
So Australia has a very vibrant biotech market where there are over 100 biotech companies listed on the Australian Stock Exchange or Securities Exchange. We believe that there is a significant valuation gap between Australia and the US market, for example, which really reflects the size of and depth of the capital markets. It also reflects that companies tend to come to the market early in Australia. And so we are starting to see significant interest from foreign investors and large biotech funds in the US and Europe in particular, because of that cheap price of Aussie biotechs.
So the next one from Andy. So what's the next step with the GE Healthcare cooperation?
The next steps in preclinical development involve GE doing what's called radiochemistry development, so attaching their radio tracers to the iBodies and studying those in mouse models of cancer to demonstrate that we can actually image the target enzyme and that correlates with disease response. So that program will probably take about a year. We'd expect the next milestone in about a year's time.
And next one from Ryan, and he's asking, what strategies are you using to attract potential partners for this platform?
That's a great question. So we have two different strategies here. To partner the platform itself, we're obviously have an asset that can be sold multiple times. So we have a focus here on technologies where you use, particularly where we use the iBody as a targeting tool for another therapeutic payload. If you like, we're using the iBodies in this situation as a GPS tracker to deliver our partners' cargo to a relevant target. And GE is a good example of that, where we're delivering their PET imaging radioisotopes to the enzyme required. In terms of Ad214, we get to sell that asset once, although we are looking at partnering that in Asia, potentially before we partner in the rest of the world, which will give us two opportunities to partner that drug. And how do we find partners? It's a combination of active reach out to companies that have complementary technology or have sales and marketing capability in the relevant therapeutic field. And that usually comes through attendance at major industry conferences such as the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference or the Bioindustry Organization Conference that happens next week.
So we'll take the last question here from Manny. So he's asking, any chance to enter the Chinese market, sir?
Yes, indeed. China is now probably the second, if not, was the third, if not the second largest pharmaceutical market in the world. It is certainly a market that is a major focus for all pharma companies looking to commercialize products these days. We do have some conversations happening with Chinese companies. In previous lives, I've set up subsidiaries in China, so I am familiar with the market, and that is certainly something that we're actively considering.
So thank you, Dr. Oldham, for joining us all the way from Melbourne, Australia, to present and answer all the interesting questions here today.
Thank you, Gilbert. It's been a pleasure being here.